I'm going to be talking about Sedicii, the company that I formed, and Krypton, the digital identity network that we're creating, and how we're using a technology known as zero-knowledge proofs to verify people's identities on that network, deliver value to those people, and do that in the form of a digital asset known as a token. And I'll talk a little bit about the economics of the token and how we build and incentivize people to engage with that network, so that ultimately everybody is going to come out a winner, hopefully. So it's about Krypton, the technology that we've created, the zero-knowledge proofs, and how all that hooks together to make success for everybody. Good evening, everyone. Rob Leslie's my name. I've been working as an entrepreneur for a number of years. I'll preface all this by saying I'm not an expert in blockchain, but I understand it. It changes daily at the moment, almost, such is the speed of change. And it's a real challenge to keep up to date with all the things that are happening. I'm going to ask you to indulge me for 10 minutes to give you a little bit of context around what we're doing around identity, because without understanding that, it's very hard to explain what we're doing with tokens to incentivize participants in our network. And once you understand what happens within the identity network that we're creating and how the mechanisms work, it becomes a little bit more obvious, hopefully, how tokens can hook into that and make it useful for people. Digital identity is what we're focused on. It's a project that I spend a lot of time on with the World Economic Forum because they realize digital identity is broken. Who you are, it's fractionalized, it's all over the place. Some of the information is true, some of it's untrue, some of it's half complete. It's just everywhere. And trying to identify who you are as a service provider, if I'm doing business with you, is a real challenge. And equally, on the other side, for all of us, trying to prove who we are to somebody is a pain in the neck. We've all had to go through the opening a bank account and bringing in your passport and your utility bill, and we need you to do it multiple times in multiple places, and it's just a complete and total nightmare. So this is the problem we're trying to fix. We're ultimately trying to create a global network, a digital identity network that will create friction-free economic activity. So any organization who wants to do business with you will be able to identify you seamlessly with just a consent. So they'll be able to contact you through a push notification to your phone to say, may we have access to your information, please? And it might be your name and address, it might be your name and address in a passport, it might be name and address, passport and something else, but you give the permission for that to happen, and then they go off somewhere else and get it. But they don't get the actual information, they'll get a token for that information, which will have a permission attached to it. And ultimately, that permission will expire, and the information will just reside where it started, and this information will not persist in perpetuity, which is what happens today. And it expires, because your identity has a shelf life. I mean, we've all moved house, some of us have changed names, all kinds of things happen to us throughout our lives, and that information persists. So ultimately what we're trying to create is this identity network where we're able to do all these things in real time. So I know you are who you say you are right now, at this moment in time. We use a technology called zero-knowledge proofs, and zero-knowledge proofs have been around for a long time, but they're only becoming cool in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, when blockchain developers suddenly realized privacy is an issue. We can't keep putting sensitive information out there that identifies people and what they're doing and what they're up to, and make it publicly available regardless of how cool you might think it is. You've got to have capability that keeps sensitive information private. And this is what zero-knowledge proofs enable. At its core, what it does, it allows me to prove to you that I know something without sharing what I know. So I can prove to you my name is Rob without telling you my name is Rob. So we're able to establish between us that we're talking about the same thing without ever talking about the same thing. Now, an example might be there's a plant on the table there, and the example I would use to prove that it's a plant is I'd say to you, and you'd give me answers back that are yes or no. Is it green? And you'd say yes. Has it got leaves? Yes. Does it live in a pot? Yes. Do you need to water it every day? Yes. And gradually, the pool of possibilities starts to shrink to the point where there's only one logical outcome, yet nobody has ever mentioned what that one logical outcome is. But we're then able to infer through the questions and answers that we've asked that it is what we're both thinking about. We do this mathematically in less than a second for the piece of information we're talking about. And through this, we're able to prove your first name, your last name, your age, your passport number, driver's license number, address, all of these things actually align in all of the different places that those bits of information are stored. So we're able to establish very quickly, through a consensus actually, whether someone is telling the truth about their age or their date of birth or whatever it is, without anybody ever sharing anything at all. So it remains completely private to the organization or the person who has it, but trust in terms of, is this person a persistent liar or are they a persistent truth teller, becomes very obvious. And ultimately what we want to get to is a place where we have no personal information at all being stored on a public blockchain, because public blockchains and GDPR are sort of fundamentally incompatible. Because under GDPR, I have the right to ask you to erase my information. And if you put it into an immutable public blockchain, you can't erase it. So anybody who wasn't aware of that, just be careful. Do not put anything that is personally identifiable into a public blockchain. Otherwise, you are going to have a problem. We've created this mechanism for any organization through what we call a zero-knowledge verification engine to be able to match information they have about you with information that somebody else has about you. So it might be a hospital with the government, or a telco, your telephone provider with Netflix, or some merchant that you're buying something. Pizza Hut, for example, you might need to prove that your address is valid, and we could do that with ESB, for example, completely seamlessly in the background. We want to get to a world where it looks something like on the left-hand side there, where we have this global network of verification engines running behind the scenes, where any organization who claims to have your identity can verify that information with anybody else. And they pay a fee for that. And part of that fee will go to you as a royalty for your participation in the system. Now, today we're going to make this happen with fiat currency, with euros, dollars, yen, whatever it is. But the payment to you will go to you in the form of a digital token. And it will sit in a wallet, whether you know that wallet exists or not. You can go and collect the wallet and whatever is in it at some point in the future and convert that asset into real money at a point in time. So it's like a savings scheme that you didn't even know existed, but is there for collection at some point in the future. And this is one of the things that we're going to use as a hook to try to get virality into the system and get some of the network effects coming into play. 3 basic layers. So we've a bunch of APIs. We've got the privacy network, which is the ZVE engine, and then we've got the public blockchain, which is recording the proof that a transaction happened on a certain date at a certain time, affecting a certain person. So this is the bit that I really want to get into, is how do we use tokens, digital assets, and I deliberately use those words because I do not like the word cryptocurrency, because it gives the impression that it's money, and it's not money. We're using it as something like a chip in a poker game. You can convert it into cash when its usage, its utility has completed. So you buy it, you get your chip, you play your game, and then you cash out at the end. But it's not money. And this is something that I think people get really confused about. So for it to be a security or money, there's what's known as the Howey test. And the Howey test is basically 4 things. For something to be dubbed a security, a share or a stock today, it has to be an investment of money. You've got to be able to invest money in it, in something. A common enterprise, like a company, because you're doing it with a common purpose. There has to be an expectation of profit, that you're putting money in with the hopes that this business is going to generate profit and you're going to be able to extract that profit. And the promoter of the business is going to be the one who's going to do that. So the board of directors and the shareholders or so on will contribute to make this business happen. If it doesn't meet any one of these things, it's not a security, okay? And this is what the big argument in the US is at the moment, is that the SEC in the US will say tokens are securities because they do all these things. But we would argue that the token we're using is no more than a chip in a poker game, or exactly like a golf membership that can be traded. And there are golf memberships that can be traded on exchanges around the world. It allows you to purchase something, use it for a period of time, and then sell it on to somebody else once you've finished with it. So the two biggest classifications of tokens, security tokens and utility tokens. Security tokens come under existing legislation. So all the regulation that the SEC has in place for managing securities today will apply to you if you are deemed a security token. And that is not a good thing, because that's a pain in the neck. The regulations exist, they're onerous, compliance is mandatory, the reporting requirements are very clear, and if you get it wrong, you go to jail, pure and simple. There's no gray zone in the middle here, it's black and white. We want to be in the zone of a utility token, and this is where there's huge gray areas in many jurisdictions around the world, and slowly but surely it's starting to become clearer. I'll explain a little bit later how we're going to do this. We're going to form a foundation in Switzerland. Why Switzerland? Because Switzerland has got a good reputation as a country. It's got strong laws, it's got a good banking structure, people trust it. But it's also got very clear rules around what is a security token and what isn't a security token, what is a utility token, what isn't a utility token. For us, we want to be absolutely in the category of a utility token because we don't want the reporting requirements that a security token brings. The primary differentiator in Switzerland is if you are investing money through an ICO into the creation of a product that has not built its platform yet, that is a security because it's an investment for the creation of an asset. If the asset already exists, the platform exists, and you're investing money in it, you're now essentially becoming a member of that platform, and you're then able to subscribe for a utility, a membership essentially, that allows you to play on that platform or participate. And that's where we want to play. We're being very careful about not turning our token into a payment instrument. Again, a whole raft of legislation around what is a payment instrument, meaning you are a money transmittal service, moving money from point A to point B. Rules and regulations around that, you've got to be very careful about not blotting your copybook on that as well. So anybody who's thinking about creating an ICO or doing a token-based business, just be careful of these things because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble without a lot of effort. The SEC is taking a very hard line, and they're taking a hard line because there have been a ton of scams basically created by very entrepreneuring shysters who have come up with an idea, written a white paper, and raised hundreds of millions of dollars and disappeared. Last year it would have been normal to have seen an ICO raise 100, 150, $200 million, and 12 months later, 66% of them are gone. And the guys are gone. They're on a beach somewhere. Might be a good idea, Getting it right. So how we're going to structure this is we've got Sedicii, the company. It's an Irish company. Our business today, we could set up and we could start selling our services through licenses or whatever. But trying to build a global identity network, trying to sell licenses individually is bloody hard. It's impossible, right? Google has failed at it, Microsoft has failed at it, Facebook has failed at it. And the reason they failed at it is because governments will never put their citizens' information into the hands of a single commercial entity that gives them essentially the keys to the kingdom. Which is why we're going to create this Swiss foundation, which will essentially receive the software as a donation from us. It will be a not-for-profit foundation, and it will give the software away to anybody who wants it. And then you ask, how the hell are you guys going to make money? Well, we're going to provide services to this foundation for which we will be paid. And we will be paid through the money the foundation receives for the sale of tokens in order for people to participate in the network. So how do we sell these tokens and how do the tokens work? Up until 6 months ago or 9 months ago, I'd never heard of this equation. MV equals PQ. It's 160 years old. It's the basic equation of exchange. And it's basically how economies work. Matching supply with demand, essentially. So you can read what M is there, P, Q, and V. The biggest challenge in all of this is V, the velocity, the speed with which an asset changes hands. So think about something that we know and use on a daily basis, cash. Cash changes hands very slowly. You put it in your wallet, you walk out, you go to a shop, you take it out, you give it to the shopkeeper, it sits in his till for a day, he takes it to the bank, it sits in the bank for a long time. So it doesn't move quickly. If that cash started to move literally at the speed of light, the velocity has gone from the speed of a tortoise to suddenly, literally light speed. And the velocity of that asset is instantaneous, which means if V is infinitely fast, M could be almost close to zero, which means the size of your asset base has gone to nothing, which means your market is nothing, is very low. So controlling the velocity, meaning the exchange of the token, is extremely important. And this is something that we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out. How can we make sure that when we sell tokens into the marketplace, that we don't have irrational exuberance where the thing goes wild in terms of value and then suddenly you've got to swing the opposite direction. What we want to try and get is a slow, steady climb that to a certain extent is managed and controlled through the algorithm that sits inside the smart contract. Now, again, I've used some terms here that are probably unfamiliar to people. A smart contract is nothing more than an agreement that's executed in software between people who are transacting on that contract. So an agreement between me and you that I'm going to buy something from you for whatever, and I'm going to pay you the price for that. It just gets executed automatically in software and recorded on the blockchain. So in our world, we have four big main providers, a four-sided market essentially. So we've got relying parties, organizations who want to verify who you are, and they will have tokens. We have the zero-knowledge verification engines, the processors of this information. We have the identity providers, organizations who have information about you, the government, utilities, telcos, banks, that I can access to verify who you are. And then lastly, there's me and you, the consumer and the citizen. The token that we've created is what we call a double-sided token, a two-sided token. So depending who owns it, different effects come into play. So if I'm a relying party and I hold tokens, it entitles me to discounts on the services that I'm going to consume through the network. So just for argument's sake, I walk into Bank of Ireland and they want to verify who I am. They would pay, just for argument's sake, 10 euros to the passport office to verify who I am. Without tokens, they would have to pay the full price. But if they held a certain number of tokens, it would entitle them to a discount. So they might get 10% off the price. That discount is proportional to the amount of money that the bank is willing to pay to purchase those tokens that otherwise might have been used to go on deposit somewhere else. So in essence, they're saving themselves money through the token, which is greater than the money they would have generated had they put that money on deposit with somebody else, if you sort of follow my logic. I've lost a few people for sure. This took me weeks to figure out, so don't feel too bad. The second part of it is the zero-knowledge verification engine provider. So if I'm a processor in the middle, somebody who is processing a transaction, by holding tokens, I get the right to perform a service. So if I don't have the service, if I don't have tokens, I'm not allowed to process transactions. So the analogy in that scenario would be chips in a poker game. So I have my chips, I'm allowed to play. If I don't have chips, I can't play. And the number of chips determines the amount to which I can play. The more I have, the more I can play. The citizen in all of this just receives every time a transaction happens. They just get a cut automatically. And why do we want to just give them money? Well, because that's the incentive for all of us to say to all of the people who have our information, hey guys, we want you connected to this because every time you verify me, I get paid. There's money in it for me, so do it as much as you like. And over the course of a year, you could earn a couple €100 through this without doing anything, without even knowing about it. And I guarantee you in 10, 20 years' time, when your kids find out that they've been missing out on this for those 10 or 20 years, they might have a few €1,000s in there that, lo and behold, could come in very handy. And they just have to go collect it. Now, what we're hoping will happen is that we end up with these two feedback loops, a business feedback loop and a societal feedback loop, where you get these virtuous cycles that become self-sustaining and actually force growth in themselves because you get network effects kicking into play. As more identity providers connect to the network, more transactions start to go through the network, more royalties come to the individuals, more individuals encourage more providers to get connected to the network, which drives more traffic, and so on and so forth. And you get to a point where the network starts to increase. And you end up with, over time, something that looks, we hope, like this, where initially, investors are the ones who hold all the tokens, because they're the ones that are going to pay the 30 million that we're seeking to raise initially to get this network off the ground. Over time, they will start to sell those tokens into the marketplace as more and more organizations start to participate. So we've got relying parties and the zero-knowledge verification engine starting to hold tokens, and us as individuals starting to hold tokens. So the investor pool is going down, and the relying party pool, of which we are one, starts to go up. And the verification engines in the middle holding some, but a very small amount of a key amount, because they enable the whole ecosystem, holding some of that value. If we do this right, and we manage to get critical mass, the value of this ecosystem is hundreds of billions of dollars, which should mean that the value of the token over time, as the economy increases, the value of that economy increases, will start to increase because the number of tokens is fixed. So just say, for argument's sake, it's €1 billion to begin with, is where we start with in terms of the value of that economy. If we can get that to grow to 100 billion, 200 billion, 500 billion, you might see growth in the value of the token, because it's fixed in quantity, grow exponentially more than that. So a token that's worth a cent today, in 5 or 10 years' time, might be worth 100 times that or 1,000 times that. So not only are you getting paid for the transactions that go through the network, you've got the capital appreciation of the token itself as it sits in a wallet somewhere waiting for you to collect. And this is what we're trying to hope will gain people's imagination, and they'll go, holy shit, this is pretty good. I don't have to do anything. As an IDP, I just have to put my information out there. As a relying party, I'm actually paying less than I previously would have had to pay. As a verification engine, I've got a new revenue stream that I never previously had, and I don't have to pay for any of the software to run it. And the consumer is getting paid for information that previously they were giving away for nothing. That sounds a pretty good deal. So, should work, right? Should work, right? It will work, right? But the hard part is getting to critical mass. The hard part is what I call empty swimming pool syndrome, where everybody's standing around the edge looking at each other going, that's a beautiful swimming pool. Why is nobody in it? But as soon as you get some brave organizations or individuals diving in that pool, everybody will suddenly want to get in the pool. So it'll go from slow adoption, whoosh. You suddenly hit that inflection point where everybody will want to get in. We've got to get to that inflection point before we run out of money. That's That's the key challenge. So some of the areas that we think the private information economy, where none of us get paid for our information today, we think that's going to change, and privacy is going to drive a lot of that. Facebook are finally realizing that people are fed up with them monetizing their information, taking all the profit and trying to sell us, we connect the world, we make you all wonderful, happy people. That's not good enough anymore. We want a piece of the action as well, thank you. Specialist services for high security legal applications, so airports, airlines, law enforcement, where again the sensitive applications that are high value. And then the decentralized economy, where blockchains and tokens I think are going to enable a whole raft of new business models. And I'll give you a couple. I mean, one that I think is going to be huge is fractionalized ownership of a physical asset. So today, for example, we buy our house. We buy it in its entirety and we go to a bank to borrow money to do that. What if you could go to a blockchain-enabled mortgage provider where you could say, I want to buy this house, but I only have to buy 51% of it in order to get control of the right to live in it. And the other 49% gets sold as fractional pieces of bricks and mortar that other investors will buy, which they can sell whenever they want because it's all recorded through a token on a blockchain. That means instead of a house costing €1 million that you have to buy, you only have to spend 510,000 on it. And you still have the right to live in it, and others will own the other 49% of it. I'm seeing some quizzical faces. That is what's going to happen. That is about to hit the market in London, and it will destroy the mortgage market as they know it today. Any asset can be fractionalized. So property is one, airplanes, cars, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. Everything can now be fractionalized and sold. Services can be fractionalized and sold and bought and traded as investments. Typically where an airline, for example, might have spent €1 billion financing a new fleet of aircraft, they could say, we're going to issue a token to finance this fleet of aircraft. The token they issue might entitle you to discounts to sit on that airline. And you can sell it whenever you like. Someone else will buy it. And it might appreciate if the airline does well. So the whole bundle of things that I think is going to be enabled. So the airline is making the decision, instead of paying €1 billion to a bank and paying all the interest to the bank, I'm going to offer a discount to all of the passengers, which would be less than what I would otherwise have had to pay, but there's a capital appreciation potential in this for those token holders if my business goes well, and they get the discount for riding my airline. So there's a whole bundle of models that are going to come out of this, and I don't pretend to have knowledge or even the intelligence to figure them all out. If I was a bank, I would be paying a lot of attention to this because this is potentially massively disruptive for the whole banking system, because you now remove the central trust point, which is the bank. Even though we all say we don't trust the bank, we still put our money in it. We now don't have to put our money in it. We can put it into a whole variety of decentralized asset options and purchase tokens that we can sell at any moment in time whenever we decide to, and have the security of knowing that it's all properly recorded in a trustworthy way.